got one way. Well, I'd love to see
It's really hard when you know it. Thank you, that's really helpful. And would I point people, could I point municipalities? Yes. Put together, have it, just need to update it, like a list of like solar providers that would do like municipal school projects.
I'm just going to leave a few here. Yeah, we'd have to be taking on this like that. Maybe right now to the record. Yeah. All right, we have a quorum. Let's go ahead and get started.
What it says. No, I would have heard that. This tiny. Oh, right. It was in too. They're exploring energy committee coordinator talking.
It's supposed to be. All right. Can I get everybody to focus in on the task at hand? Bill and Joey, whenever you're ready.
We're ready.
So thank you all and welcome to the final of our Vermont Climate Action Commission meetings. We are due to issue the report to the governor with recommendations by the end of this month. And this is the final regular scheduled meeting. As I sent out in the email blast, we do have a tentatively scheduled meeting with the governor on the 31st. We'd love to have as many of you make it as possible at 10 a.m. I believe on the 31st to go through, to present our recommendations to him. And I think we ought to get some time at the end of this discussion to talk about how we want to present those, because going through all 55 in the time that we have is probably not feasible. So we should talk to him about what we think, sort of how to present that. So we'll talk about that at the end of this discussion. This is the culmination of an incredible amount of effort that has gone into these recommendations, and so I want to thank everybody here, not only the commission members, but staff and other outside expertise that has played a huge role in pulling these together. So thank you all. As you saw in the email that I sent out, our most recent emissions data suggests that we are continuing to increase rather than decrease if we need to. In fact, the 2014 and 2015 numbers, so thank you to Colin and crew for getting through 2 years worth of data in a year's time. So that's great to have more recent data, but it's not a good story. We are basically just below our peak of 2004 emissions levels. So we've got some work to do. I think we present some recommendations that are moving us in that direction, but it's going to take a lot of work. So I want to thank the members of the public who are here. Happy to have Bob, the green guy, here filming it for us.
Thank you.
We'll take a comment at the end, and then as we discussed at the last meeting, having some opportunity for additional public comment. Have discussed with the governor and staff, and they like that idea a lot. They like the idea that we presented that basically we finalize our recommendations and then provide an opportunity for people to comment on those recommendations. And then that information would go to the governor for his consideration as we get to the implementation side of things. So they would like to open it up for a good long period of time, something like 60 days for public comment. So we would hang it on the existing Climate Commission website, and then all of those comments would be compiled and submitted to the governor for him to evaluate. And so I think that's a nice piece to get the public more engaged in our process, and I hope that sort of satisfies some of the questions we had. It's not perfect, it's not a draft comment on our draft, but I think where we are and where we were going, it's a pretty good solution. And then Just a quick wrap up on at the request of the commission, Paul, with help from others, and I sent a letter to the governor recommending and CC'd the legislative leadership, recommending the use of the most recent round of VW settlement dollars to be used for a state-funded EV incentive. Governor has been evaluating that idea. It did not come up in the context of the FY19 budget finalization. So there is some time to further develop that, and certainly we'll consider that. And certainly, I had questions from legislative leaders on it as well. So I think that's something we certainly look forward to. And I think, as Jennifer brought up recently, I think it makes sense to probably update the recommendation that we have in here to reflect what we've already said on the subject. So sort of plan on that as we go through the recommendations. Paul.
My first thought is, what a great team this has been, how much work has been done. The people who co-chaired each of the sessions, put in an amazing amount of work in the short time that we've been doing this together. But I especially want to thank Peter. He's carried this a lot on his shoulders for all of us. It's been a real lot of work. And being a deputy secretary, you end up running all the time, doing everything that needs to move forward in an aggressive way in your agency. And carrying this, it's a lot to do. So I really appreciate the leadership. And you've done it with a lot of grace, and it's worked really well. So the other thing is we've got our work cut out for us today with 55 ideas on the table. We're not going to have the perfect final answer to this. We've had this discussion of whether this effort is historic. Well, it is. This is the second commission on climate action established by a Vermont governor. It's not the last. It's not going to be the last. We're in a fundamental challenge. Our report says we are facing a fundamental challenge to human civilization, and Vermont needs to do its part in this. That's true. And we're at a table where we're putting our best cards forward to say this is the best we can do today. We know it's not the final answer, but we're going to move the mark today. And then 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, whatever it's necessary, this is going to be more, and we'll have ongoing work within agencies to lead and move this stuff forward, and lots of activity and activism and partnership by lots of people. But we should be proud of that, knowing our own limitations and having humility in the face of that too. But I just want to recognize that because it's really important, and how we're all on the line together for something, even when we disagree, and we probably will on some of these things. That's okay. It's just been a real honor to be part of that conversation.
So with that said, we'll get right into it, but can I have a motion to approve the June Climate Commission meeting minutes as drafted?
There's a couple of typos.
Are there?
Only on your last name. Co-chair walked, and then co-chair walk, and then co-chair wink. I thought it was a drinking game for a while there. Every time you saw the name spelled wrong. But that's just on the first 4 paragraphs. But other than that, I would move that we accept it.
So do you make a motion to approve as amended by fixing typos?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? I'll abstain, I wasn't at the last meeting. Okay.
Likewise. I blame autocorrect.
That's definitely true. So just a couple of things, and I'll vote at this point, voting for Michelle Boomhauer and for Ted Brady. They both gave me their proxies. Michelle will be here, but she is running late. Michelle, actually, neither one of them was here for the last meeting, so we'll abstain for both of them on that vote.
Okay. That is fine.
All right, so before we get into the specific recommendations, we want to talk about sort of the overall flow. I know Joey brought up a major topic of conversation that I think we want to reserve to the end, because it's sort of, now that we've talked about all these recommendations, is there enough there? And that's kind of the point that Joey wants to make. And so I think we should hold that conversation till the end. I think there was some really good work coming together from the different sort of small groups to kind of create a vision for how we wanted this to look. Obviously, some of the infographics were a challenge and other things, but I think overall it presents nicely. It presents the vision of what there are sort of reason for action and then gets quickly into the details. There are some imperfections with it, like any report, but I think it's in pretty good shape. Are there any sort of broad comments that people want to address about the report at this point? I guess I have one in the introduction. I think, as Paul sort of talked about, it's the threat to global civilization. I think if we want this to hit home for Vermonters, I think we might need to reel it back in a little bit to speak to, the rest of the report kind of speaks to Vermonters where they are. And the sort of opening sentence to me sort of presents a kind of this is more of it's the global threat that we all know it is, but I think we want to get Vermonters to act. And so I think to speak of it as a global problem makes it more difficult for us to sort of bring that problem to be a local perspective. I think the other thing that we could potentially add is sort of what does a business as usual look like for Vermont? We don't do anything if we continue on the trajectory we're on. What does Vermont look like? And I think that might be a compelling addition to the introduction. So I guess I'm interested in anybody's thoughts on that. Right.
I like those ideas. There are a number of notes that I wrote down in margin as I was writing through this. I don't know whether that would be better sent to you.
Yeah, then let me address that point. So if there are sort of general editing pieces that you think are sort of non-substantive that you'd like to provide, please just send them to me and I'll compile them. It doesn't make sense for us to go through line by line. I think this one to me was a framing sort of what are we saying right up front. This is a global challenge and we want Vermont to be part of the solution, not just for the global challenge, but for what that global challenge means for Vermont.
So to that, there's a section on page 2, I guess it is, my numbers. I printed this before the numbers went on.
I apologize about that.
It is what Vermont might look like with smart, strong, and strategic climate.
Yeah.
And really the first sentence sort of starts down that road, but then the rest of the next page, much of it, is about, I think, the global situation, doesn't talk about Vermont's position in that at all. So I found that to be a mission, especially since aspects of it are discussed in later sections by other groups, but it was an opportunity to tie up where we are in a more clear and concise way. And I don't know at that point whether some of the rest of this could be reviewed. Sure. But at least that seemed to be the same.
All right, everybody comfortable with Paul and I sort of taking the pen on refining some of this a little bit more? We'll try to get a draft around everybody before it gets submitted in the end, but I think we all know generally what we want to say. It's kind of clarifying that message a bit. One of the things that I wanted to ask a small group to look at is we had sort of metrics associated with the impacts of different things, especially within the greenhouse gas impact side, and I think we still don't have a ton of consistency. And I think it would be really useful, and I'd be interested in, I have some ideas of who we could throw on this as a group to kind of go through all the recommendations and try to standardize a bit, and sort of say we think this one should be should drop down 1 or go up 1, if that makes sense to people. I know, Kat, this is something you had flagged for me, and I was hoping you might be interested, either Jared or Linda might be interested, Jennifer, Dan, Dutcher, I think a lot of the transportation ones, there's some question on, Alex, if he's available, and then Robert, I don't know if you have any interest in sort of the lead on the sequestration side. Just kind of coming together and saying, okay, let's go through these and where do we think that there might be some inconsistencies. And then we can query the leads of the different groups and say, how did you arrive at those numbers? What were the assumptions you made, so we can make sure that our assumptions are the same. Because I think that's really what it's about, rather than the specific numbers. It's about what assumptions did you make? Was this additive as the whole of all your actions, or was this for this specific action? And I put in the sort of unlocking thing as sort of a little bit of a, not a cop-out, but a sort of a way to say this is a foundational element that in and of itself doesn't have an emissions impact, but it will for the follow-on.
In the commerce, the last section, to me, that made sense. It made a lot of sense in the way you guys used that in that section. I think you're right.
The walk thing was great. I really like that. I do think that we have to be, if there's a source for the information on any of the metrics, we should source it. If it isn't, then we need to provide the rationale for how we got there. Because otherwise, it's pretty powerful what we're showing with that.
Right.
And so we gotta be,
And we have to be credible in our,
yeah. So that was one of the comments that I had overall as well.
It's a pretty blunt instrument. We look at weatherization, there's some things that are mostly a study, and then you have doubling weatherization, and they both have the same marker. So that's really significant that it's that blunt. And I don't know, I think the ideas are more important than that one instrument.
I think the idea for me is to make sure that that provides enough fidelity and enough credibility to our recommendations that the language then speaks for itself. Like, that can be the sort of the visual that people need to see what this idea can do, but that it doesn't get in the way of the credibility of the idea. Jared?
First, happy to participate in that. Second, I think the challenge is less about knowing the emissions reductions numbers for a specific action. I think we have sourced information for a lot of the recommended actions in terms of what is the relative emissions impact of, replacing one average fossil fuel vehicle with one 100% EV, for instance. The challenge is when the recommendations don't have a specific number of EVs or a number of heat pumps or a number of advanced wood heat systems. What are we multiplying that emissions impact by? And I think that that's part of the challenge we would have to get at to confidently.
Yeah, and I don't think that's possible.
Yeah. So to the extent that I think that we can just say that there's more confidence in the assessment of the possible emissions reduction for the recommendations that have specific numbers associated with them, and the ones that don't almost have to have an asterisk in terms of at least the emissions reduction impact, unless there's a firm number associated with the scale of it.
I would comment that there's no time frame associated, there's no discussion of the time frame in here either. So the reader doesn't really have a sense of whether this is immediate or 10 years or 20 years.
What do people think of a small group getting together to try to iron some of this stuff out? Do you think it's feasible in the next couple weeks?
At least you could get as best consistency as you could across those categories. We do the best we can. I think it's a good idea.
I think it's really important if we're going to keep those.
Yep. I need somebody to be in charge of that.
You gonna be at it?
Am I going to be?
Would you sit with them or no?
I think I won't be gone all of next week and out of touch, so having me at that is not going to be valuable. I'm going to start looking over at Ken unless anybody wants to volunteer.
I mean, Jared, is that something you can do with your new fresh numbers?
If necessary, yeah. Yeah.
With
It's the enthusiasm. I raised it, I don't want to do it.
I would be happy to convene a group of interested parties to take the best shot at it that we can.
Yeah, or at the very least figure out a way to add language that suggests here's where the variability comes in.
Maybe send Mark Change's edition of it to Peter and I for like a final.
But yeah, we'll need to integrate it into the whole thing, but I think,
Yeah.
That's great.
Just sort of stepping back a little more broadly, because some of this, I think kind of along the lines of what you both said in your introductory remarks, I wonder about some sort of acknowledgement in the narrative that this is imperfect. It's a start, it's a great collaborative effort, and it's likely not, it's clearly not everything that's gonna be needed. I just think it's like important to say, like, we've done some really good work here, and we're offering the governor and the state like a foundation upon which to build, but it is not, again, likely everything that's gonna need to be done, and it's a strong foundation.
Yeah, which if that's not in there, then we definitely need that, because that was sort of the intent of our prioritization exercise, was
Yeah.
to say that we can't come up with the one because.
Right. So I think potentially just recognizing that very briefly in the letter, and then in the narrative.
Okay. If you have some
I can work
specific
on-
edits, that would be very helpful.
I'll send you some.
Any suggestion that comes with specific edits?
And just in general, specific edits, being a former copy editor, at some point, if someone's gonna copy edit this, like, I would do it, just literally for like periods and stuff like that, and
There's a lot
spelling
of- yeah.
mistakes. I would do it unless there was some copy editor within your shop.
You just got,
I would do it, I didn't copy edit all my stuff. No, that was my former life.
Give me half of it,
Okay,
or
cool.
some of it, maybe a third.
So we'll talk afterwards about timeline in terms of when to get
Okay.
those
Another
things.
question about
Yeah.
So my comments apply to the introductions to the various 5 sections. Seems like those should go to the committee chair first, if they're substantive in terms of content, and then to whoever's putting it together.
That makes sense to me.
We may work through some of that today, we'll see.
One more high level on the metrics.
Yep.
We use 2 different terms, feasibility and ease.
Is there feasibility
So
ones
in
still on
the
there?
key, it tells it's feasibility, and then at the top it's ease. I know, sorry.
It's all right.
So
We
the-
kept changing
that-
things.
Every time.
Issue is back
Well,
again.
that's what happens. Copy and paste it at the bottom of every single one. All right.
So I was getting confused yet again.
All
Maybe
right.
it's just me. This one
That's
seems to
easy.
be a challenging one for me that but we gotta figure out.
It'll be
feasibility
ease.
or
It'll be ease. That's an easy one.
Along the same lines, does anybody feel strongly that the word infographics should remain? Can we find a substitute for that word? To me, when I think of key or chart or something that's less confusing.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's really more of, it's less of an infographic than maybe our original intent had been, so.
It's helpful though.
No, I think they're really useful, especially in the specific actions piece, but, it's not an infographic.
It's just a term that doesn't have a clear.
And it sounds like we're trying to be hip and cool, and we're not.
No, you're not.
Heard that, Bob.
At least there's internet here.
Oh. It's been 9 months since you've gotten to make that joke. Since you haven't decided to show up. All right, so let's get to we are a little bit behind already, where let's get to the recommendations. Ryan Woods is taking notes. Tammy Wusenberg over there is gonna tally the votes. I would imagine most of our votes will be fairly, I like to think that most of our votes are gonna be unanimous on these. I think there are a lot of these that we've gone through over and over again that people should feel relatively confident about. In light of that, we really wanna go through this to reserve as much time as possible for those issues that really matter, that we need to talk through. If you have a sort of non-substantive edit or question for a group, then let's reserve that as Robert said, sort of show it to them afterwards and see what they think and see if we want to make an adjustment. But if we're good with the overall sense of the recommendation, and there are some wordsmithing you'd like to do, let's move forward.
One quick question.
Yep.
For all the groups, are these recommendations in order of your own individual priority already, or are they just a list?
I can speak for the Smart Growth Group. We attempted a list of prioritization, but everybody had so many different interests that there was no consensus on prioritization, so I left them as is.
So no, it's basically.
No.
Peter, can I just request that if you're gonna abstain or say nay, be very loud, because I can barely hear you guys with this air conditioner blasting over here.
All right. So, I'm gonna put them up on the screen just so we can not be able to fully see them, but at least then we can have kind of where we are, what we're working on.
Do you want me to dim the light?
Does anyone have a paper copy?
Do we need this? I mostly have this for the public, but there's not a.
There are paper copies.
There are some paper copies in the corner as well on the chair next to Dan. Maybe we just skip. I mean, leave to the group. Do we want them up on the screen or not? Everybody comfortable with just going through it? All right. That makes life easier. All right. So, starting with the, Paul and I are going to swap off sections just so we can pace ourselves and have a voice at the end of this. At the beginning of every recommendation, we'll ask if there's any opposition to an idea or a substantive amendment to propose. If there's not, then we'll proceed to a vote. If there is, then we can have some discussion around specific amendments so that we can move forward apace. The first recommendation is to double low-income weatherization through the State Weatherization Assistance Program. Are there any concerns present with this recommendation?
My only concern is that it comes first, and it's only, has the smallest greenhouse gas impact, the smallest savings. To Bob's point earlier, is there something else we could leave with, and more cloud icons there?
Yeah,
It's just, you know.
I'm not sure I agree with that one cloud, when we have the same one cloud for something that's a study in some places. You
Yeah.
know? So I think it's actually much more significant, and it was the priority of that group. It was the first thing they wanted, so we had to deliver a decision.
That's my only observation. It's not gonna vote no because it comes first.
I have the same question about whether or not the greenhouse gas emissions impact this.
I agree.
Well, that conversation will happen with our working group.
All right, let's.
Is your objection removed, Joe?
Sure.
We can vote.
Joe's happy.
All in favor of accepting this one as a yes?
Let's have a motion to include this recommendation number one in the final report to the governor.
So.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
Recommendation two.
Recommendation number two.
I have a question. Does it make sense to focus, I don't know. Vote the whole group of homes and workplaces, all of these items. 1%, 2%. I'm gonna get through it.
Does everybody feel comfortable that we're giving voice to things that need to be given voice to?
Can I just ask a process
Yeah.
question? In the, I know there's a small group on greenhouse gas, because I only noticed a couple that had that very same question.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that that is gonna happen. But my question is also related, will they tackle the investment piece as well? Because on this one, I feel like in the investment, if we're saying to double, and we spend approximately $9.5 million annually, it seems like we would need $3 little dollar signs. So I just wonder, I can take my question offline and punt it to that group, but there's just a couple of those recommendations where I actually had that question that seemed disjointed.
I think that's those line up nicely, so let's put that to that group. All right, well, so that I had assumed that we would like to go through each one individually, but we can vote on them as a slate if people are comfortable with that. Are there any concerns within this slate that people want to discuss?
And by within this slate, you're talking about
The
the
buildings, the first grouping, so
First,
building energy.
I've got one, but it's just a wording on number 3. Number 2 is very clear, accelerate advanced wood heat. Number 3, encourage cost-effective investment in customer use of building. Can't we just say accelerate heat pump deployment? Building time.
or is the word electrification?
Yeah, it should be, should be in there.
Yeah.
It's building electrification.
Yeah. All right, I'll
But
make
that's
a note
just-
to retitle.
Just change it.
Okay.
comment on number 2. I have a little hard time hearing 2. Hopefully this wasn't covered, but in the background for recommendation 2, it does talk about using wood-fired electric power plants. And I don't think that's what this is about, and necessarily that would even be good policy. So I would, at a minimum, strip that out. And you could also clarify that this is for wood heat only, and doesn't apply to using wood for electrical production.
That's the question.
Where's the language specifically about?
In the background.
In the background near the end, second to last sentence.
Yeah, I think there was some general background about sort of the use of biomass generally that we sort of plugged and played. I'm comfortable with that. I don't want to limit the opportunities for combined heat and power if those exist.
Did you just say something about electric lead? Vacuums power seems like a travel lead application.
Well, I mean, so I think about McNeil and whether or not that's ever going to happen. And I think lots of us would like to see it, see it happen. So that there's better use of that waste heat. And to me, that's electrical lead at this point because it's there.
But it's just a description of the background, it's not an action statement. It's just saying burn wood for some generation.
I guess my only other question is that recommendation 2, action step 2 calls essentially for a fee date for advanced wood heat. I think if people are comfortable with that, that's fine. I just want to call out the fact that that's the only one where we have tackled something specifically, as a funding mechanism outside of the sort of the final section. I'm not raising an objection, I'm just highlighting it. So, any other thoughts on the slate of building recommendations?
One quick thought that I'm not sure has a simple solution, but as this document hits the public, I can see people asking how do our recommendations for advanced wood heat fit with our interest in sequestration. So we don't really address that. It's not a huge conflict in my mind, and I think there are plenty of talking points, but we don't add that anywhere. So
Can we add, it would be great maybe between you and Alex, come up with some language on that for the beginning of the sequestration section, because I think that would be, or somewhere in there that would be.
somewhere, I mean, we deal with it in this section, we deal with it in sequestration, we deal with it in the climate conflict section, so it's really thinking through how and where it is.
Do you have a thought as to, obviously this comes first, so we want to address it at this point.
Well, I think that there's a decision to be made about whether we address it directly or whether we prepare ourselves for something that may or may not come up in public discussion. I mean, to me, there's no direct conflict necessarily in this document, but
I don't see it either. It's going to be a long conversation for several years, so I'm not worried about it in or out of the reports.
we're not prepared.
Alright, so is there a motion to approve, I guess we'll approve the entire slate minus recommendation 1, since we already voted on recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
Very efficient.
I thought about going that way. I didn't want to shortchange anybody's opportunity to. All right, moving on to transportation. Discussion around these recommendations. Recommendations 8 through 97.
Yeah.
25.
I kept going.
8 through
25.
25.
I'd like to make a recommendation that we very quickly amend in recommendation 8 under the first bullet that provide point of sale or other incentives for new and used EVs. Just because I think it's really important to be upfront that we're talking about the used car market as well. This isn't just for wealthier people who can afford an EV, it's How's that? Not getting rid of just say.
It's in the
It does.
recommendation.
It's in the recommendation, but I think he wants it in the vote.
I just think we need to say it. I think it's just really important. Then, it's okay. There's a place where we use an we have NESCOM under recommendation 16 in the background, second line from the bottom. If I don't know what NESCOM means, then probably your general leader won't either.
Well, there's a glossary in the back, which has all of them in there. Yep. Because there's no way to do a chart this size and not use acronyms. I can say it.
All right, about to the chair.
I trust me, it irks me to do it, but it's, I did have a question about, recommendation 23. Which is the exploring the viability of the commuter rail service in Vermont. I'm not really entirely sure what we're recommending here. There's not really, to me, there's not really an action, a concrete action associated with the viability question. And if we want an action associated with it, then I think we should ascribe one to it.
I'll just say, as I've said to the group, commuter rail's been discussed repeatedly over the years, and it never seems to pencil out economically. So, you know, it's a very sort of European idea, and got a certain glitz to it, but it's cheaper to just run more buses if that's what you want to do. So.
Well, so I guess the question is, then, have we explored the viability of commuter rail and already answered that question?
I think we have, but I was outnumbered when I made that comment to the group, so I'll let others carry the conversation from here.
So what I recall, and others participated, was there was clear recognition that at this moment in time, bus service and the expansion of bus service should be our priority. But I think the thinking was not taking rail and like it being a potential part of the equation later down the road completely off the table. So it was meant to be more squishy, but not to like fully take it off the table at some point, maybe not now. It would be viable, who knows?
So what can I make a suggestion? That we amend this recommendation to be sort of continue investment and maintenance in our rail network, so that at a time when if commercial or if it might become viable, then we're not having to invest a ton of money in reestablishing this network. Hello, June Tierney.
I was trying to decide whether I should join the script or run. And then I was trying to see where my seat.
You're over here, I think.
Thank you. And my apologies.
I guess that seems more in line with how I would think about it. This was one that I was not enthusiastic about. I actually think that we have made significant investments in public transit for buses and trying to support two different modes of public transportation through rail and bus is challenging in a very rural state. So I was not really in favor of putting a lot of emphasis on commuter rail. I do think there are opportunities for rail service that takes us outside of Vermont and brings people into the state, but not so much within the state. So I guess I would be in favor of speaking more to maintaining the infrastructure we have, rather than trying to keep the
Does the governor need
drumbeat
us?
on rail.
Does the governor need us to recommend that?
Right.
I mean, is it useful to say that at all? Or is it just sort of a placeholder? I mean, to me, I wouldn't say it unless it was useful for us to say it.
And I think we're trying to make bold statements about how to fight climate change, and if we just keep looking at what the railroads are doing, that's really not much of bold action.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of this
So June, to bring you
For the
up
overall group.
to speed, we are on the transportation section. We have elected to vote on recommendations as slates of their categories. We have approved the buildings one as drafted. And so we are now on the transportation.
I'm just going to say, under this item also seems, under the action step, seems to include the idea of a transit, encouraging transit-oriented development, which is a fine notion, yes, which is relevant to any kind of transit, public. And in our area, we actually have an opportunity to commute already. Coming up to Massachusetts, there's a new rail line in the Springfield, Northampton, Greenfield, get it up to Brownsville on several trips a day, actually, if you look at work. And now it's once a day down and once a day up, so it's not really.
So you feel that the governor needs us to say that for that to happen?
No, I think it sort of captures I now on the committee with my senses and was trying to capture an idea that we didn't want to happen.
I'll weigh in because I was on the committee and I remember we had a lot of recommendations. And we talked about this one. I'm where Jennifer is on it. Like, I think we've been really good as a team of sharpening it to be action oriented on real deliverables that are going to deliver something. And I think it's fine to have in, but I do feel we had a lot of conversation about this, and as someone on the committee, I would be more than comfortable not having this in this report.
So I guess there's a question of, it's an absence question at this point. I think if it were absent, it would, from the beginning, probably wouldn't be that noticeable given the discussion that's had over the years. But if we actively choose to strike it, that says something about our feelings on civic.
I think if we wanted to keep it, but didn't want it to be its own recommendation, it could go under 24, which talks about just increasing, implementing programs and policies around multimodal transportation. That could be another action step if we wanted it to be. So we can also just strike it.
It's interesting, I like that.
Yeah.
Harrison, would you like to make a motion to amend the slate
Motion to amend the slate to include recommendation 23 under action steps and recommendation 24.
Second that.
all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? So we have a motion to vote on the slate as amended. The transportation slate as amended.
So,
Oh, sorry.
one, just a,
Let's get Harrison head one
Sorry.
first, and then you can go.
okay.
I was wondering, with 19, 21, and 24, it seems like there's some overlap among those. I don't know if they were purposely separate. I don't know. I just felt like 19 sort of fit in with 24, and there was like, I don't know where they were, where the line was being drawn between them.
Vehicle focus, and the other one is more like sort of rideshare and
Okay. Just,
focus.
just talks about ride shares, I guess, but we want to keep the EV definitely.
I think
Yeah,
I like the
yeah.
uniform.
Yeah, and it's a definitely a separate idea.
Okay.
So the idea is to look at fleets as a target for electrification. And those are taxis, ride-sharing fleets, rentals, and those are definitely a different idea than multimodal.
Hey, Dan, can you go let Michelle in?
Then again, if we just have language tweaks, we should just send it to, yeah.
Going off of the sort of time frame, I think it could be helpful to add a time frame part of the key, with like 15 talking about this. Like at first when I talked about a workshop, I was thinking that was sort of a more short-term thing, but reading through the background, it sounds like it's longer term, so adding some sort of time frame, I think, could help with clarifying.
Well, I think the PUC workshop is, I mean, it's already started.
Right, but I've been thinking of it as more like a singular event.
The last note, VUC doesn't do anything in single
I
events.
realize that really true. That's where I just thought time frame could come in.
I think that gets complicated and difficult to understand quickly, given the various scales of action. But I appreciate that thought. All right. You
And
have-
then, there was just a question about, whether we wanted to look at the language for the incentives, adding, should that just be added to the background? Or does it mean, do we want to amend the actions? This is more of a process question. Yeah, recommendation 8, sorry. I think we want to show reference that there's a source of funding that the Climate Action Commission has already weighed in on. We should
I think we
just
should be,
provide that
I
as
think we
an
should,
edit,
I think we
but-
should be direct and say that the Climate Commission recommends using VW settlement funds from the, we'll be specific about which settlement it is, because there are multiple, for the use of the state funded EV incentive.
Okay, so that would be amending the recommendation itself.
Yes.
Okay.
Are you going to vote on that amendment, or do we just understand that's in line with the decision we made last month, so we don't really need to vote on it? I think it's sort of not a consensus on it.
Got it. Yep.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Any other thoughts on this slate of recommendations? So, sorry, since I tried to jump the gun before, is there a motion to accept these as amended by including recommendation 23 as an action step for 24? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Look at us cruise,
Wow.
motivated by.
Before we leave this particular topic, I guess I've been mulling around whether it's appropriate or not, but maybe it's a question for Jared. I saw a report recently that if we remove the EVs, we'd end up with a 38% additional electricity demand. It seems like there's an embedded assumption in all of this that, first of all, that the electricity would be renewable, and secondly, that there would be sufficient supply. And is that background that belongs in the initial discussion, or is it just another one of those things where we're gonna let it slide and wait till it comes up?
I think that's really important. I don't know the answer, but I think that's important.
I like adding that up front. I mean, that's sort of the reason why we're not talking directly about renewable energy in lots of these discussions, is that there's an assumption that that's somewhat basic. We have requirements in place to drive us down.
In line with the goals of the state clean energy development comprehensive plan, we're building on that plan by accepting that that's part of the goal. Maybe we should be explicit.
And the assumption is that this kind of recommendation is integrated into that goal.
Just to speak specifically to the question, the way that we did our modeling, it was to assume that the state was hitting the renewable energy standard goals at a certain amount of renewable electricity based on. So, I mean, there is that assumption embedded in, I think it's fair to call it, to explicitly say it.
And some utilities, like I know PED and WEC, some utilities are already 100% renewable, so they're beyond the state standards.
This is sort of something for the introduction, Robert.
I think that's an important thing that, I mean, so I think there are a number of things that we've forgotten that we talked about over the course of time. And so I want to make sure we're capturing some of those things. Some of them we talk about in sort of the process section at the end, but if there are really important things that we need to hit up front, then let's hit them. Because obviously that's a critical feature. If we're burning coal, then switching to EVs is probably not the right answer.
It's still cleaner. It is.
Savings are there.
It is, but we're not, so I think we should call that out.
And I think, Robert, to your question about supply, that's not really a concern. So I don't know how you want to address that, but I know that GMP, our rate is less than it was in 2003. So there's a lot of EV adopters and folks who can imagine that heat pumps or solar, and they're also very efficient.
I think we've got the concept that to to answer this and make sure that it's up front in the introduction. That's really great that you brought it up.
Maybe this is a question that I should probably know the answer to, but maybe those who are closer to the energy world might know, but the clean energy standard requirements came into effect when? Okay. So I'm just thinking about how that jives with our most recent emissions data, where we saw an uptick in emissions from the electricity sector, primarily because of the closure of Vermont Yankee and sort of the regional mix. But I just want to make sure that we have that those two talking points don't go in.
To me, that would be an argument for not doing anything for the law. I think we're better off not stating an assumption because it leaves the report vulnerable to attack that assumption is not being held out. Unequivocally, state policy is to pursue renewable energy. And so I think it makes sense for planning and recommendations to sub silencio assume that that's what's going to happen. Not that there's an evil in calling it out outright, it's that you leave yourself open to debates about what exactly is it that causes it. Is that a reasonable assumption? And I don't think that is the scope of what we're doing.
I guess the only thing that I would add to that is I think that we can do it in a way that doesn't call it out as an assumption, that basically says these recommendations build on the existing renewable energy standard. Right.
Yeah, we hesitate on that too because existing implies a new change. We're talking about a new normal. The new normal is our energy is renewable. And to your point about burning coal, I heard somebody call out that in fact it's still cleaner than that because using this technology more efficiently is going to be. And also, we're desperate for new uses of electricity, renewable electricity, because we're generating it and we're desperately hoping that the transportation sector will help us out. My comments come late, but they make the point that this is more complex than we think, and I don't think we need to invite the debate around teasing out that complexity to make it.
It may be, I think, to your point, a way to say it without saying the assumption.
We're saying too much.
Say too much. The piece that I like about it is we don't focus very much on distributed generation in this whole report, and that could be just to say because we have focused on it a lot through our renewable energy standard, and
The state is moving that
we're
direction.
moving that direction. To your point, like we are. So I think it could be just a way to say like we kind of got a lot of that covered, and
Yeah, I
hence
think
why
we're
it's
all-
not as embedded in the rest.
We'll figure out the right words to say to not say it too much.
I think it's a simple, not getting into the complexities of the state energy plan, but it is the plan of the state, it is the plan of this governor, and so it's not particularly controversial.
Okay.
It's not controversial plan of the state, which I recommend on the rest.
All right, so we have approved the slate as amended and are moving on to, you want to do the next one?
I think you're doing a great
Oh,
job.
thanks.
I'm happy to follow along.
6 through 34.
So we are moving on to communities and landscapes, which is recommendations 26 through 34. Any comments, suggestions, additions, changes that you want to talk about? Other than priority?
Well, I guess I do have one on recommendation 26. So when I look at the list of data that's described in the action, being sort of a data geek myself, I'm aware that all of these, every single one of them is already collected. And
But not fully across the board.
perhaps fully across the board, it certainly is true that they're not mined, that they're not analyzed, and that they're not presented in ways that are useful.
They're not collected across the board either. And they're not organized in any sort of useful way, and they're not updated. So it's not a data set that provides any sort of useful universal value for planning purposes.
Well, that may be true. Some of these I know are, some of them are becoming more. But I guess I would also say that the way this is structured, it appears to me that the emphasis is on collecting and not so much on analysis and reporting. which is, to me, the purpose of the recommendation to start with. And that may just be a wording change if it's consistent with what the subgroup discussed.
I guess so there are two ways that we can go about amending this if we wanted to do that. Was to remove the end report from the opening line or add an action step that included some sort of reporting out of what that data tells us.
I guess I would just jump in and say that unless we're going to specifically charge some entity or entities with the analysis elements and components, sort of getting what you're talking about of what we're looking for here, which is, could be a whole nother commission task force of its own. I feel like having the data available and having it maintained as the underpinning for us as a group or other groups similar to ours to be able to use these data sets to do the kind of analysis we'd like to do or like to have as an output to these types of efforts and other policy making. I feel it's like beyond the scope of this commission to create the directive of any kind of reporting, any kind of analysis directive, et cetera. I don't think we have the time or the space to do that, but I do think this underlying data sets drive the types of analysis that we would want to have been able to do.
So could we add a second action step which says develop whatever the key metrics are and the analysis to create the reports to answer the question you're trying to answer? Now, if that's an action step, it is something.
Then
there's some
somebody
work
begins
for that.
to look at that work,
Yeah.
that body of work.
Because it would be, I think, useful to have a.
The other opportunity is sort of, we be more clear about the sort of pieces, the types of analysis we might be able to do. Like, to me, it's a data set that helps us answer a range of questions. If we were to write a report based on it as a whole, it probably wouldn't be that valuable. But to answer individual, more direct questions, it can be incredibly useful. And so it might be that we change the recommendation to measure it and maintain that data set. Because if we capture it once and then don't maintain it, then it's going to be of no value going forward. And then we can speak to more of the sort of the value of it in terms of analysis within the verbiage. Does that make sense?
We speak about another recommendation. So, I don't have, my comment was.
No, I think that's a good comment. Yeah, I would not want to presuppose what questions we might be able to answer with this data set. In this group.
I would support Bob's suggestion to lay out at least a pathway for coming up with appropriate measures for the data that are now passing through. That's someone who's maintaining it.
Recommendation 27 says that.
Right. Yeah, mostly a different set of measures.
Maybe these two should be, like Harrison wisely did earlier, maybe these two should be combined into A1 and 2 within one thing. So you're building this data set, and then you're using it to develop these indicators to evaluate the impacts of development. It's kind of like a seamless 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
A lot of this is kind of internal. This one's way down in how the state government used to be.
Yeah.
So you guys know better than we do that if this is useful.
Yeah, I think the recommendation 27 is more valuable to Vermonters public. That's sort of a public-facing piece to say, how are we doing at meeting our smart growth goals, and how do we, and they're not. They're, a specific set of, key performance indicators that are sort of speaking to what we're doing rather than saying, there are X number of parcels that have, infringed upon key forest habitat or whatever, like, I think that to me is a different sort of level of analysis. Or a different audience maybe for that analysis. We'll certainly use the former to create the latter, but don't necessarily need that level of fidelity. But I'm fine with combining them in some way if that's what we want. I can come up with a way to word that so that it, so that it's about having the data and being able to share it and talk through what it, what it needs and what analysis we can do. The idea with the smart growth, sort of thinking about Vermont specific smart growth metrics was that most of the smart growth work that happens out in the world is for much larger areas where it's difficult to think about a village being a smart growth hub. But that's what we've got, and that's what we need to think about, right? And so I think having a set of indicators actually helps us speak to what our progress is.
Does anyone want to make a motion around combining these two or taking other action, or should we just leave them as they are? Yes.
My recommendation would be to keep them as they are, just based on your description of that. I think they are enough to different.
Any other motion on this?
I have, for the purpose of discussion, the same feeling. After hearing the discussion, I'd keep them separate.
Okay. No action required by the group then on this one.
Other than, I think recommendation 26 should, I guess I'm feeling that recommendation 27 addresses the development of metrics and the use of metrics. And 26 should just be about the development and the maintenance of the data that we use to address the metrics. Like, take out.
How about measure, report, and maintain statewide development data?
That works for me.
Just rolls right off the tongue.
Yeah. And that should, and I think that should be our lead recommendation.
Yes.
I'm just teasing.
It is.
It is.
In this section.
All right. Other qualifications or suggestions about other recommendations within this section?
So my only other question was on, and this is partly the sort of the nature of the division of our groups, is that we have recommendation 31 speaks to targeted land conservation, and then recommendation 42 speaks to sort of sequestration specific land conservation. And they're pretty much saying the same thing in some, we've broadened the targeted land conservation to include some, sort of on the resiliency side of things, flood resiliency, other things that play, into the larger picture. So they're somewhat distinct, but they're overlapping. I'm fine with leaving them as they are. I just wanted to flag that to see if anybody else has.
Yeah, I personally think there's a benefit to leaving them as they are, that calling out large parcels and the importance of those contiguous tracts of land as a long-term strategy in Vermont is useful. It's certainly something that matters to Commissioner and others, so I think it's useful.
Yeah,
This is a motion to make a change on this.
I certainly thought some of the specifics around getting to questions of getting to scale so that we can, for the carbon offset market, important to highlight too. I just wanted to flag.
Okay, no one's making a motion on that. So, anything else under?
Joe had a question.
It's just, it's one word under recommendation 28. I think we need to be very careful about how many times we use the word expand. Because I think one potential freak out on this will be, wow, expand more government.
Yeah.
So rather than the word expand, perhaps provide broader interagency and intergovernment support, or provide additional interagency or intergovernmental support.
Okay.
Just to, I know it doesn't change the recommendation, but it just might head off some headaches.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that as an edit, unless anybody has any probably concerns at all. And as we do some copy editing and go through, we'll look for other ways in which we overuse words.
Thank you, Joe. Any other substantive motion?
I had just a question about number 5 on recommendation 28. I don't know what that is, the smart growth audits. Is there something you could add to further describe that?
Sure. So smart growth audit is a really interesting concept, and maybe Frank ask Jared to add in if need be, but the basic concept is you have somebody from the outside look at your existing, laws, policies, and regs and say, are you getting in your own way effectively to achieving smart growth goals? Think about parking requirements and other things like that that are standing in the way of things like that. So we can
municipality.
from the municipality, yeah.
Sort of add a little bit more description perhaps.
Provide municipalities with smart growth audits on collective
Everybody
practices.
knows what that means. I just had no idea. I could guess, but I didn't really know what
Okay.
that meant.
Having digested that, other comments or directional statements on this section, or a motion to accept them with the amendment?
Move to accept the slate with the amendments.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, work team.
We actually amend something there, or just the language,
Just
right?
language that wasn't in the motion, so we
Okay.
captured it.
Gotcha.
So we're sequestering carbon.
That's good.
Want me to run with this?
Do it.
Okay. We've got recommendation 35 to 42.
44.
44, okay. Observations on or questions about particular recommendations in here? Again, for each of these sections, we need to give a big appreciation to the chairs who worked so hard, Robert, in this case, real serious labor.
I had a question about recommendation 35, and I'm wondering if the intent here is to have this be a net sequestration, so does it take into consideration emissions already at play from the cattle and other trucking and other activities on the farm that are creating emissions, and so that we're looking at net sequestration of agricultural practices less the emissions that are required to conduct and achieve those sequestration values. And do we need to maybe be specific about that?
So there's an argument to be made that we are capturing all of the negative, all the emissions associated with agriculture through all of our other work.
Okay.
We're not capturing the value of sequestration. So I think there's an argument to be made that we could pull in some of the values from the existing inventory and try to create sort of a net perspective, similar to what we do for sort of on the forestry side. We sort of talk about what the net emissions are, with sequestration included. We just don't have the data to answer the question about what is the ag sector adding in terms of our
That's a
soil
question that someone
sequestration.
on the team developing this one should be asking for sure.
Yeah.
Is that something that we need language in
Maybe
here?
we just need to make sure the language is specific to understanding that we need to address this holistically to account for.
Taking that.
Okay.
Are we comfortable with that?
Not seeing anyone objecting, so that's a non-substantive amendment. Anything substantive but doesn't require it. Anything else in this section that people would like to ask a question or have a suggested improvement or have a problem with it, would prefer not to see it in the report?
I have a question on 43. I'm not really sure why we're reassessing water quality funding as part of this. I think I understand what the goal is, but I think we need to reframe it if the goal is to say that we want to prioritize or provide additional funding or the like for water quality projects that also have the added benefit of providing for carbon sequestration. I think we should just say that. I go.
Any thoughts, Robert, on that?
Well, I was smiling to hear. because
Yeah,
this got-
this was really specific for Marley because she really sees that drop off in funding in 2020. And if we don't continue these practices, if we don't have them pathway to continue these practices, we can undo all our good.
So instead of reassess funding needed to continue, how about assure continued water quality, assure funding for continued water quality improvements that also suggested? Is that doing the job, or is that a dangerous statement?
No, I think that's a great statement to make.
Is there anyone who objects to making a change like that? Okay, so let's take out the first 2 lines of that down to 2019 and just say assure funding for continued water quality. Okay, other thoughts on improvements or things that you would not be for and don't want to see included in a vote? You want to amend out of this vote?
Well, I'll bring up recommendation 44, which is really overlapping the Smart Growth recommendation. So I think that I wouldn't have a problem with seeing this one disappear, having it be integrated perhaps, or even, I think it's assumed that land transfer and information on parcel size and boundary is incorporated in the Smart Growth one. But the key here is that I wanted that information to be accessible when I wrote that recommendation. And based on our discussion of where this whole data collection and data analysis piece goes, the reason that I framed this as I did was because I think there's already a tool out there, there's a tool that the state's already promoting, and this fits into it. So I think that it's not that strong a recommendation. It could be, but anybody sees a way it works. This is the previous platform.
I think it can be. I think the idea, I think, to me, it's so the environmental mapping tool may be a place it resides, but it's a data layer in any GIS tool, right? So any GIS tools that we have out there that are relevant for land use, we can figure out a way to include that data layer as needed.
Is it important to affirm this in our report? Is there anyone who wants to see it in the report? If none of us care enough to want to affirm that the governor reads this, then it probably isn't important enough to put in the report for us today. So is there a motion to take this one out of
I'll make that motion.
to amend it out? Okay, there's a motion to amend this one out of the platform from this work group.
There was a second.
There's a second, yeah. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Boy, we have been unanimous so far. Okay, any other discussion of this section before we take the final vote on it? Seeing no hands, I entertain a motion to adopt this section. Okay, thank you, June. Second? Harrison? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so much.
This is going to be a really easy appendix to put together on votes.
So far. So the next section is jobs in the economy. It would be better if you have some amendments to this.
Okay. I will be happy to talk. I mean, not really, but. All right, so obviously Paul's got some discussion points, so maybe let's start with others to see if others have thoughts on this section.
On 45, the third bullet point on that, reduction steps is to initiate rate design case before the Public Utility Commission, and we actually already have work in progress in this area, and I think it's limiting to specify a rate design case before the Public Utility Commission. And a lot of work that we do offline that effectuates reform without necessarily involving the trees. So what I would recommend is that we instead say initiate rate design reforms as appropriate. And that includes the path which we see and doesn't specify as the only path.
Listen to the expertise in the room on that.
Was that a yes?
Yeah.
like this, elsewhere in my life, all the time.
We're very agreeable today.
Peter, on recommendation 50, action step number 1, it says draft legislative language to make the 2 changes in the veggie statute. Well, I think we need to say what those 2 changes are.
You're sort of described it well, I thought, in the background.
Yeah, I just don't know that anybody's gonna, people don't always read the background, and if there's a way to, like, just make a little bit of a clarification there.
A zero rate for background growth to calculate incentive payments and $200,000 investment pools.
Yeah, whatever spending needs to be done, but I just think calling it out in the action step, as a saying the 2 changes. And when you call it out once, then I think it's okay for the second one to say 2 changes, but 2 changes above or whatever.
Any controversy around that? Okay. Peter, can I share?
Yes.
So this work team we were really busy, and it was really hard for us to get together as much as we wanted to. We had a little internal controversy, I guess, around what grid modernization was. And on a couple of these, like establish $1 million innovation fund, create small business innovation research and grant matching program, and then enhancing employment growth incentives for clean grid modernization businesses. When we were talking, sometimes we were talking very specifically about grid modernization businesses, which is a very small pool of businesses that are looking at smart meters in the home and how those integrate services, right? But we were also talking about distributed generation and storage as aspects of what a clean, modern grid looks like. And so I have 3 proposals in line with that, because I think that some of this really leans in on the very specifics of the modernization technology, and some of it is really about the larger world of distributed generation. So on number 48, I would add, under eligible expenses, should include product development, startup costs. Do you see this in the middle of the background? Eligible expenses should include product development, startup costs, equipment purchases, and talent acquisition. And I would add in clean energy, grid modernization, distributed generation, and storage businesses. So that it's competitive, but creative, new technologies and new business operations that clear ideas would be applicable to, yeah, and I can give you the language. So that's one. Do you want me to go through them all together?
Are you still on 48?
I'm on 48.
You're ready to transition from?
I know, I'm just asking Peter if he wants to hear the 3 different places where this is important to me. The second one is on 49, where we're talking about a research grant matching program. And again, the research grant matching program, if someone's developing, if someone in Vermont wants to invent a new solar roof, like a paint or something, or a new surface, or a new technology, and wants to be applying for this, I think that we may not have been fully in consensus as a group, but I think at least half of us were really thinking about this broadly in terms of the distributed generation, storage, and grid modernization. So I would add in this one, in the background, the second to the last sentence, the state could encourage Vermont businesses to utilize the program by providing a small match to any SBIR award made to conduct grid modernization work. And I would add, or R&D in distributed generation, the distributed generation field, including modernization. Like, we want to include the battery storage arena and creativity, research and development in grid modernization in the same context. And we can go back and deal with each one by one, but the last one is 50, where we're talking about I'm sorry, there's one more. Under veggie, clean grid modernization, that Vermont Employment Growth Incentive would be for clean gridded modernization businesses, but also distributed generation and storage businesses. And then finally, under 51, a fully refundable research and development tax credit wouldn't just be available for those people who are designing in-home software for modern grid. They'd also be involved in this sort of second to the last sentence in the background. Many startup companies wait years to be profitable. In the next sentence, by making the tax credit fully refundable for clean grid modernization, distributed generation, and storage businesses. You're not saying you're going to invest in the next guy who wants to put up solar panels, because you're not. You're going to invest in someone who has an R&D product designed to build a storage, a solar panel that's different than any other solar panel that's ever been developed before. So you're investing in the cutting edge of the economy to attract creators who are going to be doing design and distributed generation in the future here, to capture the imagination of folks that are doing battery storage companies and say that you're going to get a tax refundable credit. So those are my three recommendations, and I haven't talked to Joey, but I know we've both been kind of frustrated that we didn't quite get there. We hoped for a last meeting, and it was impossible with Ted's schedule. So I think we would have gotten there in that meeting, but I want to just put that out there. I don't know how you want to digest it.
Let's just have some general discussion about the addition of those concepts, because they're all are sort of the same thing.
I like it, I think it makes it better.
Yeah, I think we need to have that.
I think the emphasis needs to be on innovative so that we don't get, just more panels. So making sure that we connect the word innovative or innovation or whatever into those recommendations.
As a side note, there's a federal R&D tax credit for qualified. Certain napkin.
Yeah.
Which is bigger than the state tax.
It is, but we want to make that different.
I like it. I like it.
So I don't know if we need to amend it, Peter, or how you want to deal with that digesting.
I think that's probably worthy of amendment, that sort of
I
changes.
make the motion that of these changes, with the note, knowing that we'll need to finalize language with Peter. Hope that that will
A second. But you have discussion.
Question. When I read, for instance, recommendation 48, it talks broadly about climate economy businesses. And when I first read that, was appealing because innovation can happen in sectors beyond the three specific ones that were mentioned that could be really important given where most of the fossil fuel use and most of the emissions are in. Is also in, not that they're necessarily different, but if there's a new, more efficient way to do a pellet mill or micro-transit or some of the innovations that are really critical for the transportation and heating sectors that we've identified, I was curious why the committee wanted to focus explicitly just on grid modernization and some of these other called out pieces rather than leaving it more open to broader innovation across the creative economy that would touch these other sectors that we've identified and are also critical.
Yeah, we were partly responding to the question that the governor gave us when we sent our first recommendations around this initiative area, where he said, well, when you're talking taxes and you're talking about specific grant dollars and so forth, you have to be absolutely specific what you're talking about categorically. And I think that we narrowed in, and I think that a number of people in the committee were uncomfortable with how far we narrowed in. And my motion is to narrow back out, or to stretch back out. But it's not really an open-ended for anything that you might want to call a climate economy idea. We really were talking about still the grid, electric generation, efficiencies, and storage in terms of the innovation. In practice, if they build $1 million fund, it's not built by us. The legislature will figure out language that would best use it potentially more broadly, but I'd be happy if we got as far as.
I think the establishment of the fund is a worthy goal in and of itself. I think these are realistic businesses to support in the near term. And there may be additions we want to add. I don't see anybody building pellet boilers here. They tried to do it in New York, and I think the business is closing because they're making really shoddy equipment, but they just didn't have the right stuff, and there's not enough demand locally to support it. So I guess my feeling is, I think I like where we're going and say we're building on our existing strengths, and we want to create a climate economy of scale around these topics, and then we move forward there. I guess that's my level of comfort with all of it. I think there's probably some work that can be done, but I'd like to see a bit of a proof of concept before we sort of broaden the tent so wide that we get into the, well, come on guys, what is this climate economy thing really?
So there's a motion and a second on the table.
I had one other question. Where did Ted come down on, that you said your group is about half and a half, and
We never really
Since
got
he's
to
not
resolve
here.
this conversation. Yes.
Can I? Yeah, Paul's addition today really helps. It is the innovative aspect, is when we talked about distributed generation and thinking about those existing companies that exist in Vermont, and to incorporate them in these strategies was considered too broad. But the innovative changes to really advance any of those specifics, I think, very certain he would agree with.
And hearing that, I will use this vote accordingly. So there's a motion and a second.
Just clarify, we're not finished discussing it, we're just talking about the amendments.
Yes.
Thank you.
Amendment to add the language around clean distributed generation and battery storage or storage to pretty much each of those recommendations.
Those four.
Innovative. All right.
Right, no substitute.
And Paul and I will work on language to add, because my pen wasn't fast enough to catch all of that. So there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Right, June, you had another thought on 48?
Yes, I did. First, I appreciate all the references to the Clean Energy Finance Collaborative and the desire to model this after the Clean Energy Development Fund, because those are things that I think have worked very well, and I'm certainly very proud of the work that's been done in the Clean Energy Finance Collaborative. I think the meat of this matter, though, is more in the vein of climate economy development, and it's about small businesses. I think it's less about renewable energy. And one of the thoughts that I have, having been working in state government, like most recent passage for a year and a half now, is that I would like to see greater disbursement throughout the state government of ownership of these ideas as full cross-pollination. And so when they all get concentrated in the Clean Energy Development Fund and now moving toward the Clean Energy Finance Collaborative, I get a little, I just have a reflex that says, wait, does it have to be this way, or is this going to work? Let's keep thinking of it, because those are well-working mechanisms. I'm worried about overburdening it, for one, and for another, I would love to see what something like Ken Jones does with this. And so I don't see why it couldn't be over in ACCD, for instance. So my recommendation on this one would be that we loosely call for the establishment of an interagency group that constitutes this fund, or maybe not even identify that, but rather simply say, create a new fund. And to the extent that we're going to have a designated lead, that could be the department, it could be ACCD, it could be an interagency group that's constituted for that purpose. But I think that would be better, because the work of the Clean Energy Finance Collaborative is tapering to action items now, and I would not want to see them, as soon as you say here's $1 million, it's a shining object that draws attention. And with the Clean Energy Development Fund, there are issues that we have there. I appreciate the idea that $1 million would be positive there. It's not CEF money, it's money modeled after how CEF is used, at which point that becomes a burden for us. So I hope I've been clear what I'm suggesting, is that we axe the introductory clause to the background piece on recommendation 48, so this starts with creating a fund. And secondly, that we eliminate specific reference to the co-chair finance collaborative and instead substitute an agency of this group's choice or to say interagency group.
Yeah, what about as a starting point to say something like interagency group led by DPS and ACCD, which could frame it out together?
Yeah, that would work for me, or led by ACCD.
I honestly don't even think we need that piece in there. I think the establishment of the fund that's the recommendation, right?
Yeah.
We need to.
And to be fair, there's the number, action step number 2 shouldn't have been in there, right, Ken? That was one where that's an error.
Okay.
Because of the formatting of this, of them being squirrely, I essentially had to create new ones out of all your ideas, since there was a lot of copying and pasting, and sometimes there was a mistake.
Good.
Okay.
And no one even noticed it, that's what, that's how.
Really?
Okay, so June has a motion here to eliminate the first line up to create a new fund and get rid of the Clean Energy Development Fund language preceding it.
Exactly.
And then to take out across from 1, convene experts in finance, talk about an interagency group
Yeah.
within state government.
Interagency, including VITA, maybe. I don't
Want to
know.
include
I would just say,
DPS?
The
interagency group and let the,
Yeah, they can figure it out.
Well, so is the action, I mean, can I be more blunt and say the action is really the establishment,
Establish the fund.
pass appropriations for,
Yeah,
define legislation and pass appropriations for, to create this fund, and then the second step can be, through interagency cooperation, develop the implementation strategy for this fund.
Yeah, chances are that's part of the appropriation process.
Yeah, it'll be developed, right? Yeah.
Right, no, that's a good suggestion.
Do we need to have a better sense of who would manage?
Well, that's exactly the point, right?
Figure it out
And
later.
what I was thinking is that if you don't specify that in that legislative process, you have the opportunity for a better discussion about who's best situated. Whereas if this group can specify, it's not going to be binding on the government. But I don't know that this group is so well situated to make those judgment calls, but I can tell you that from my agency's perspective, I would really like to see it go someplace else because I am intent on cross-pollinating.
Well, there's a lot of good in what you're saying, especially since this is around seeding economic innovation for small business creation, involving the agency of commerce. Having the conversation, giving the floor and the legislator, they are going to be making this decision anyway. Maybe it doesn't matter. So I guess my question is, do we have enough consensus to get rid of that first sentence up to create a new fund, and then, as Peter suggested, define legislation and pass appropriation for the innovation fund, and have it led by an interagency group? Like, are we okay with that, or do we need to have an amendment?
I would even back up a little further than that. I would use the initial recommendation language, and I would say to define, the specifics of the fund, including the appropriate entity for implementation, and put that on sort of governor and legislature as sort of the actors, and we will obviously, as state agencies, support that process as it goes on. We can include us in that as a stakeholder as well, but I think that's the normal sort of gyrations of the legislative process. I don't think we need to work too hard about having an interagency group try to define that.
Are we in consensus enough to accept this intent as our language, knowing that Peter and I will finalize the wording on it, but we're both taking hard notes on it?
I guess in terms of interagency group, I think it would be helpful to note some potential partners. ACCD, it doesn't have to be constricted, but it seems like you worry a little bit about it being so broad that there's no sense of who we think might be. So it could be interagencies, potentially ACCD, PSD, VITA, I don't know. I think we've thought about it.
So how about in the designated lead, it's legislature and governor, with the parentheses, it's ACCD, PSD, whoever else we want to throw in there. And that way you're calling out the fact that there are key players in this space that that have a discussion. And it may be just an expertise in having run similar funds, and maybe an expertise in actually needing, being with the individual.
Yeah, and it's important to know we're not prescriptive. The powers beyond us will make the decision on how this actually is implemented.
I hear what Joey's saying, and I guess, Joey, part of what I'm thinking too is, what would happen if we didn't do that? I mean, there may be a risk that we go to corrections. It's possible. A lot of things probably shouldn't. But sometimes when you don't do that, you leave a better path open to thinking transformationally. And I know that if somebody forced me to answer who should do this today, I would reflexively say, ESD, we've done this before, health, ACCD, and that would be it. And that's how you get thinking that always stays pretty much the same. So I don't feel strongly about not mentioning the assessments, but I do think it might be a step in a good direction to just recognize the limitations of what this group can do. And I think specifying a fund, $1 million is going to be a big piece to chew over anyway, never mind who we think should administer it.
Yeah, and I along those lines, there's an opportunity. We do, yes, it's good to call out the stakeholders that are engaged so that people understand that we're thinking through all of the various things. We have a disclaimer in each of those that says we didn't get all of them, we got it. But I do think it can be limited, right? It can say to the legislatures that are looking at this, to be working on legislation as they're going to be doing this fall, to say, okay, we're going to stick this into the existing piece, and maybe somebody like VITA that is sort of that quasi-governmental organization that can be more flexible in its approaches to things might be
I would
appropriate.
take it.
There you go.
I'm surprised it's not easier that way.
I know.
I was
Well,
looking for
let's
examples, not
yeah,
limiting.
let's respect this, and it sounds like we're not trying to designate. We may put in a couple that are potential places, but we might say, or other locations in state government or something like that. And it feels like this, like it's time to move on.
Yes.
People feel so?
But we're still in this section, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, but do we need to have a motion to accept these changes, or does everybody kind of get it and say, yeah, that's okay with me? Any objections to just going forward? Okay, we'll take that as a consent decision. Other questions around this section, or improvements, or things that you would like to take out of this section?
I want to talk about recommendation 45, and this is about, it's a rate design, and I just wanted to make sure, it seems like, I don't know if folks realize, but again, in our power, we already offer 3 time of use rates. We already have about half of our customers on some kind of time of use rate. And this recommendation, again, I wasn't on this committee, so I'm not sure the intention behind it. But in particular, when it gets to the background around this idea of changing consumer behavior, there's a lot of innovative ways to do that. There is sort of an old-fashioned traditional way of carrot stick of you should do your laundry at 2 a.m. and if you do, that's great, and that's great for you. But I think what you've seen with the utilities is trying to leapfrog past that and be more innovative about shared access. And just today, we sent out news that during this heat wave, because we had deployed battery storage in folks' homes, we were able to save $500,000 and not have to tell people to turn their AC down. They could use it to be safe and comfortable. So I just have maybe not specific language, but I was on the committee. I'm just trying to understand more about this, and this feels a little.
I think, Ken, you might want to check in on this. Sure. It seemed like what we were really aiming at was these small businesses, everyone from coders to technology folks that were looking at smart grid technology, having the ability to work with companies to test their models and so forth, and work with the grid. There's more to it than that, Ken. But
Yeah, no, part of it, I think, is the recognition. This is movement away from consumer behavior change
to providing the utility grid represented by the utilities and the grid operators, that mechanism to, just as you did with the batteries, to provide more of those opportunities for distributed generation, for demand, I shouldn't say demand control, but yeah, I'll say demand control, but utility-directed demand control. Heat pumps being a great example, electric vehicle charging stations being a great example, where the consumer plugs in, walks away, and the utility during times of great need changes the delivery of electricity to those units. The consumer has little to do with it, but the smart grid folks, the businesses, are really working at developing those interfaces so that those opportunities exist. So that's where
So I
this
love
was.
that. I think that is not captured
Now,
here.
that was the intent, and
Yeah.
And that is awesome.
that's
I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
So I'm more than happy to work on language changes or work with Ken, but I think that capturing that feels a lot better.
We've got it on video.
and you know,
Go back and just
when
send
we were
it.
talking about rate design, and I'm not sure if it's captured in here,
And I think
we
rate
were
design
also
too.
talking about,
So one thing that's missing here too, which is in other sections of rate design, is I think sometimes people think rate design is like this magic pot of money that's like mythical and you just rate design it, and so there's gives and takes. And so I think one thing to think about is that it's done in a way that doesn't drive up costs. And I think that was captured in other sections that talked about rate design. And this, again, is just, I love what Ken just said, and I love that sort of more innovative thinking around it. And
I'm sorry we're doing some of the work on the committee in the public here,
But I think this is important.
It strikes me, Ken, that maybe this restructure electric rate design was in line with our interest in stimulating an incentive for wood pellet mills. No?
This was when Ellen convened those folks working on smart grid. One of the things that was really important to them was having the rate design so that the opportunities existed to implement these software and hardware tools, so that there'd be opportunities.
So can we maybe step back and say that the real recommendation is to, create, restructure, or whatever we want to frame it, sort of the grid operations to enable creative solutions that create demand response or whatever we're trying to say, right? That's what we're trying to create, the sort of the ability for innovation to happen.
We definitely need to work on that language, but again, because the rate
on
cases are in the works, I mean, this ain't gonna happen. But I do think we need to clearly communicate within this document, because this is a good public way to describe this. But I'll take, any suggestions on how to articulate that more
we only
clearly.
have another minute or so on this
We
one.
need to move,
Yeah.
my thought, and I'm definitely not the expert, but it just seems like rate design is sort of the construct we're operating in already, and it seems clunky if we're really trying to think about innovation. So I think what we're trying to say is we want to create the environment in which innovation can happen, right, for incentivizing consumer behavior or to let benefit the grid or something like that. But I just feel like this is off the mark in terms
this one
of
feels
what
like a
we're.
culture compared to everything else,
Do you
something
want to
about
make a
it.
motion to remove it? Is that what we're saying?
Well, I want to do what the commission, we can reword it, we can remove it. I don't know
There's
where
nothing
folks are.
sacred about any of these things, right? If it's not of value and it's not,
I think it's critically important as
Really
reworded.
excited. I think we
it's
should
an
rework
idea
it.
of
and
having
use it
rate
everywhere.
design that reflects these.
Yeah.
But
I-
doesn't
Yeah,
meet
and I'll
our-
volunteer too.
So I guess I would ask for a motion to have, to amend it to the language broadly agreed upon around creating the environment for innovation, and propose that we allow people to work on it offline, and that we're generally comfortable with the concept. That would be, I would ask for that amendment. That wasn't really an amendment, but you could frame it better, that would be great.
I would make that motion, and I think that that's captured in the background. Read the background of this, it's really talking about something different than recommendation. So what you said a minute ago seems to be there, it just needs to be structured.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any discussion first, sorry. Pretty competitive. All those in favor again?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Any more comments on this section?
One more. I just have one more quick one, I think, on 46. I think folks realize this, but any customer can share their data with whoever they want, and it sounds like there's a robust process around looking at how to do this. But again, I think it's gotta, in the context of how do you do it cost effectively. Like, I like having that in the background somewhere. Start my machine 46.
I think that's the second time we brought up the cost effective
Yeah.
piece, and I don't think we got there on the last one.
Yeah.
I really liked it, so I
Yeah.
hope the videos will catch that. And I think that would give that thing to be a good thing.
Well, we just add enabling clean grid modernization businesses to the cost effectively access or
Or it could be
in a cost effective manner. Or as cost effective.
yeah.
At the end. Anyone disagree with cost effectiveness in this study?
I like cost effectiveness, I just don't know how it's measured exactly, so. But, you know, or what timeline or whatever, but.
Yeah, it's
Maybe that
really
could be
expressive,
part
it's
of
such a
the-
general recommendation.
I think it's to look at it because again, a lot can be done, but it could cause multiple percent rate. You know what I mean? Like, so just, I think this team, the ACCD and PSD would probably determine what that means, like, at what cost. I just think it's important to have that.
I think it's important to manifest the cost consciousness.
Certainly speaks to our charge.
Okay, other comments on this section?
Can I just take a minute, I'm sorry, to go over this? I'm getting it. It's 54 that.
Well, that's part of it. We're still,
Oh, yeah, I'm doing the entire section.
yeah, I mean, so there were slightly, 54 and 55 were slightly separated, but we should include those as part of the slate.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just start on that one. Good concepts all around. Action step 2, provide access to smart and data clean grid modernization companies.
That's a mistake.
Okay,
Should
thank
be
you.
We just did that one.
Let's cross that out by consensus.
I have 2 copy and paste errors and 55 recommendations, leave me alone.
Keeping us on our toes.
Okay, so,
Say, that's out on here.
okay, good catch. All right, anything else in this section on the wood pelletization?
I had just one, I'm sorry, on 53, but this is really asking for clarification. Support for free legal services to the required economy of entrepreneurs. What is the thinking behind that? Can you maybe help with that?
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a program in place at the law school that's starting, so this is kind of a, let's support it. But there is an activity at the law school that's initiating.
Okay, as long as it doesn't turn into the Department of Public Service makes its attorney available.
No,
It's saying the state should support and encourage that program to provide free legal services to startups for intellectual
That's
property.
a great idea.
Can
Why don't
we,
we mention
can we
that?
be
Yeah, we should
more
mention
specific?
BLS.
I think there's general consensus on mentioning BLS, since it sounds like a great idea that we can, it'd be great to say, and it's happening. And it just needs a little oomph.
This one's got the debt forgiveness element to it. Let it carry over. I might be getting mixed up. Are we on 53 or 54?
Yeah, I'm 53.
You're on 52.
Yeah.
So, but 53, I think carried over the design for debt forgiveness package.
Another paste.
Yeah.
Seriously clearly got tired of the, Ken, were there,
You see it?
Yeah, this,
There are no action steps.
all three action steps are the same for that. Ken, do you remember offhand what the action steps were? I can pull them up.
Definitely included in law school.
Definitely. Why don't we just, if you guys keep talking for a second, I'll bring up Catherine.
Okay, is
We're
there
on
anything
to
else, anything else about the wood,
Oh, not the wood.
about wood pellet discussion on 55, 54?
Oh, I'd like to open a can of worms here.
Oh, Didn't know if you were kidding or not.
No, I'm serious.
Okay.
It's in the lead up to the recommendations. So as I read this, and maybe not what we can, but as I read this, and I did a little research today as I was getting ready, I think we burn something like 126,000 tons now of pellets to heat. And we're talking about bringing 100,000 tons of annual production into Vermont. So will that substitute for some portion of 100,000, 120,000 tons that have been used already? Seems like yes, the efficient plants are there. But then I go to the last bullet and I ask, how are we then reducing additional fuel consumption unless we're increasing actual pellet use? So my question is really about what is the climate impact of this if we're not promoting more pellet heat, which we are in different recommendations, but not so much here. So
Well,
it's money.
Yeah, we kind of knew that there were the other recommendations, so we didn't think we needed to repeat that.
So the advanced wood heat aren't all necessarily pellets.
Right, but we're just seeing that too. Again, we were looking at job creation in a particular sector and knew that there is an emerging potential sector around pelletization that we wanted to encourage with a couple of simple, direct incentives.
And I understand that. I think that the question is, what are the impacts, at least from a greenhouse gas perspective? So maybe because the GHG impacts are all lumps, that doesn't really need to be explicit.
I don't think we felt the ability to quantify those in advance of seeing how many businesses will be growing.
So I'm wrestling under this partly because I'm wondering where it fits into our bigger climate GHG reduction goals. How much is mostly just about promoting business. Now, I can answer that question with one example that's not included in here, which is that if it produces an outlet for wood products, there's a positive there in keeping more support.
Yeah.
But that's not mentioned here,
Well,
so.
we recognize it. I guess we didn't try to describe everything. We're trying to be very succinct.
Well, so those are my concerns. Nobody else feels that way about this section.
You're speaking specifically, Robert, about the
Page 77.
77.
The description.
So my understanding of, most all of the cordwood and wood chips used for heating in Vermont are coming from within Vermont, or some wood chips for the pellet usage, it's like 90% imported for bags, bulk pellet deliveries, much more local. But if the benefit in terms of GHG emissions reductions from having more local pellet capacity is not bringing in as many out-of-state pellets in terms of the emissions, GHG emissions that have them traveling to get here, and because Vermont's model of community scale pellet mills, at a 30,000 ton a year range, is far more sustainable and has far less of an emissions impact than the much larger scale kind of mill or pellet plantations or pine plantation setups that have been done in the South and other places around the country. So I think there was a study done by the Northern Forest, or by Implan for the Northern Forest Center, that basically said if you're using pellets sourced from the Northeast, you get a 50% GHG emission reduction impact if relative to using fuel oil or propane. So I do think that there is a strong case to be made for a positive benefit from moving to local pellets from a GHG emissions perspective, rather than continuing to import 90% of our bag pellets from out of state.
My understanding is that most of Chris's pellets go to the southern New England markets, and that they don't really need to get sold here because they're Canadian pellets.
Right, and the, kind of the underlying reason for all of this is we need to find ways to reduce the costs for making pellets in Vermont. His pellets do go south at a very high cost. And so by being able to reduce costs for our pellet producers, hopefully that gives the sort of economic rationale that yes, we can buy more local pellets and not have to import.
We knew on one hand we were talking about increasing on our wood heat, on the other hand, we looked at some sourcing, that would be encouraging some sourcing on, we haven't finalized all that into a platform, but this is where it is. Is there a suggested amendment? We can't stay a lot of time here, so if there's a suggested amendment, language improvement, or something else that we should consider, we should, and then we'll go back to that.
I guess I would just suggest that we add some introductory language that essentially says most of the wood used most of the cordwood in chips comes either from Vermont or from the local area generally, and where there's the greatest need to marry our advanced wood heat goals with our local production and all of that pieces that come along with that from a keeping forests as forest perspective, and all of that resides in the pellet realm. I think if we can live there, then I think that's a pretty good spot for us to be. So is everybody comfortable with adding some language on that? Does anybody want to take a turn at crafting that language?
I think it's a
We have
simple
it,
paragraph.
one of the discarded drafts.
Yeah, right, okay.
And the good news is, going back to recommendation 53 with the free legal services, is all of that was captured in what I did not copy and paste.
Okay.
Essentially, it talks all about the Vermont Law School program.
I want to keep us moving, so
I
if
have
there,
one more question. I just don't understand recommendation 47. Can someone explain the background? Grid modernization is, not attractive for investors and has renewable energy, understand economic value, will enable the state and our utilities to assign the appropriate public dollar investment for its development. Can someone explain that recommendation in the background?
Yeah, the basis is if we're gonna invest public dollars
What do you
into,
mean public dollars?
taxpayer dollars.
Oh, okay. So this is taxpayer, oh, okay. That's a different thing then.
Yeah.
What is not your taxpayer dollars? Okay, that's good to know. Should we be specific about that? Because I had confusion. So you want to spend taxpayer dollars on grid modernization?
If there's value, this work shows that there's value to the overall economy that isn't captured by consumer savings and business savings, then that's a reason for using public/taxpayer dollars.
this is really an evaluation, it's not a investment.
Could you just add verifying language? Because when I read it, I thought it was talking about something else.
In the background, in the last sentence, I think it does say
Appropriate public dollar.
appropriate public dollar investments.
Yeah, I read, that was my confusion, candidly. So if we want to say, because some people can be
Appropriate state
ratepayers.
investment? Let's
State
change that.
state tax, I would be very specific about it. Appropriate state tax investment. Because the utilities can't assign, that's where my confusion was, because it says utilities to assign the appropriate public dollar investment. Like, we can't assign, I'm just confused about that. I like it, it's a good, I don't have a problem with it, I'm just gonna make sure we're being specific about what it's asking.
I guess I have a,
Oh, I see what's going on here.
the only problem I have with this recommendation is it sort of says we don't know enough about the value of it yet to make these other recommendations that we're making. Or we know, we think we know enough, but we don't know precisely enough. And I wonder whether we need it at all. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise.
I'm about
I will
Articles
speak
Razor,
up
if it's
on
not
this
necessary,
point.
we shouldn't have it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm good there.
So is it,
Well, I'm going on that, which is that the understanding of value of grid modernization in order to effectuate changes that go beyond the utility space, or to put it differently, for reasons that are not typically part of ratepayer utility interest type things, can be valuable. And we don't know what those are. But paying for it, paying for the study of it, is not something that should fall strictly to ratepayers, because you're talking about societal benefits that can go well beyond the nexus between the benefit and the ratepayer dollar. So, the way I understood this recommendation was we are recommending that the legislature invest general fund dollars in the study of this nature, and I do think that that is value the city undertake, because we are trying to figure out how to use this asset, the grid that has been created largely as a function of evolution and unfolding, as opposed to being an intentionally engineered machine. And so we actually don't fully understand all of its latent potential. And it's not, I don't think, right to hoist the cost of development of that understanding onto strictly ratepayer payments. So I do think this is something that's
Specific recommendation for improvement.
So I agree, I think that it's really necessary for the state to define and figure out, there's 37 states are doing grid modernization processes right now, and step one is this. Because we have to figure out what that means. And it also ties in with all what you had talked about previously, working in battery storage, distributed generation. I mean, there's all that comes into play, but it's really important that the state define it.
So can I ask?
The specific language that I would change.
Yeah.
Drop down to the very end when we go, will enable the state and our utilities too. I think we could simply focus that understanding its economic value will enable the state and stakeholders to identify second generation in innovations, or just identify innovations for future use of the grid that can in turn lead to the realization of beneficial GHG reduction policies.
What she said.
You can make that same argument for sequestration.
What's the?
Same thing.
Anyway, I wrote that down, it's useful.
And do you think
that's
that
fine.
clarifies that it's
It's not,
clarify that it's like a tax?
yeah, it's not telling the
Or,
utilities
yes,
anymore.
tax dollars.
It's not ratepayers.
It's a public investment, and I
like that.
Exactly.
I
Well,
like
so
that.
the only thing I would ask for is, do we want to be
Yeah.
clearer in the action steps to simply say, fund a study?
I think that would be a
That'd be great.
good thing.
And that's a good action, that's where it's
Like,
good.
fund the study.
Yeah. Like 37 other states do that. Just spend money, and I know that's not what the governor wants.
Well, if it's for the right purpose.
I know, I agree, I don't
Maybe you
disagree.
say conduct an analysis, and,
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Otherwise, you have to-
Exactly. Don't
Well,
fall
no,
for
study
it.
of studies, that looks really bad.
So we don't have time to get
That's what all
You're
of us
really gonna do a
are
study of
We
studies?
don't have time to get discursive, so I think maybe evaluate existing studies that have assigned value to grid modernization. Something like that. We need to close the door on this thing. So get rid of complete literature study and say evaluate existing studies of grid modernization.
I would conduct a study to assign value to grid modernization.
I think that's fine.
And, a lot of these things are things that we prioritize through an agency budgeting process and refer back to this, we're bringing this up because we told you to do it through the climate commission. I mean, that's a bit circular at times, but like that to me.
And would did you say conduct a study?
Conduct a study to assign value to grid modernization in Vermont.
I would say conduct an analysis.
Okay.
That's what I would too, yeah.
Good.
Because an analysis is evaluating data to lead to a conclusion, which is the dollar figure that
Paul, I'm mindful of your concern about time constraints. I do want to make a pitch that we somehow make this reflect that it's a cost to be borne by the general fund and not by ratepayers. And the easiest thing to do is to say, conduct an analysis, PSD, you do it. And then we do it by using ratepayer dollars based through the gross receipts tax, and it only goes to the car. You asked me to conduct the study there, I really don't have the money.
Well, none of us do, but yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm in the hole.
For the governor, if the governor accepted this recommendation, you'd have to find dollars
Yeah.
to apply to make it happen.
Right, which is why we want to make it clear that it's a general fund obligation, not a special fund obligation. Is my point. And when you assign PSD to do it, you effectively said it's a special fund obligation. So I don't know how we designate stakeholders or something. I mean, I'm happy to do it, but not pay for it.
Yeah.
UVM is mentioned, haven't they been doing a number of studies on this sort of thing already? Have they got money to maybe a we or a designated stakeholder?
You know, in some ways, I feel like as a commission member, I don't know how the state should go about implementing these things.
And very few do we ever mention where the funding would come from.
And
We leave
we
that
should
to the
do
governor
it.
to work.
I understand, but this is a special case, and I feel very strongly about this. When you designate PSD as the lead in these things, you are using PSD resources that are specially funded.
You take PSD out,
Indeed, that would be great.
say interagency.
Interagency.
Let them figure it out.
And that takes the utilities out of there too, which also makes me somewhat uncomfortable as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're just gonna write interagency.
Are we okay with this without we've got a general, had a general discussion on a lot of this, it's gonna take some editing. Are we ready to vote it forward without looking at a final edition here? Harrison is.
I'm happy to read the language I came up with, I wrote it down, but
We can, I'll just take it from you later.
Okay. So, do you want to leave the vote on this whole section?
Make a motion to move the slate approval.
With all of our.
And some of the changes to be
Recommendations.
determined.
45,
Selected
55.
Edits to be named later.
What's the meaning?
The edits to be named later.
Yes. Keeping with the discussion.
Second.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Joe Fusco couldn't get through the whole meeting without one contrary vote.
Oh.
I'm kidding. I'm not trying to pressure votes.
Mr. Chair, can we have a 5 minute?
Yes, that was what I was hoping to provide as soon as we finish talking. Only one of the bathrooms is working, unfortunately.
And
I hope it's the one I use.
5 minutes.
I hope it's the one I use.
We'll come back at 3:15 and start up, and we've got serious work before conclusion, so let's get right back to it.
Next order. They are, but we're going.